Hello friends, welcome to this lecture of C++ programming. In my last lecture, I had discussed about the basic computer architecture, whose knowledge is very important when we are proceeding to learn the C++ programming. In this architecture, the most important component here is we can consider is the CPU, because it is considered as a brain of computer. And CPU basically used to execute a process to give some output which you desire from it. The second component is a main memory, which is basically used to store the processes in it, and that the process which is stored in the RAM, that is a main memory, is basically dispatched by operating system to place it into CPU, and the CPU execute that process to give you the output. And the most important knowledge is that we have a hard disk. This hard disk has various partitions, but out of these partitions, only C partition is very important because it stores a set of executable files. That means whatever the request you give to the computer, it is stored as a file into the C drive. And from the C drive, an operating system has a task to load this file as a process into main memory. Fine? So you must make sure two of the very important concepts. One is load and one is save. When a file is submitted to main memory from hard disk by operating system, it is known as load. Once again, I repeat this thing, that when an operating system submits a file from hard disk to main memory to be executed by the CPU, that way of submitting the file is known as load. And when our work is get done, the operating system once again asks you that whether you want to save your file or not. That means once you obtain your output, you are supposed to store your task into the C partition of hard disk once again. And this process of getting back the process the process as a file into your hard disk is known as save. So these two concepts are very important from the examination point of view. Fine. So this is all about the basic architecture. Remember that the main memory constitute the main component of this architecture, because if I remove this main memory, I think there is no possibility to transmit the executable file into the CPU. You can consider that in real life, if a group of person want to meet some VIP person, suppose I am considering CPU as a VIP person, and I am considering hard disk as a office where lots of persons are there to meet this CPU as a VIP person. So in order to resolve the issues that who will be first to meet the CPU as a VIP, there is some company secretary who has a task to set some to set appointment for the person to meet to the CPU as a VIP. So main memory works similar to the company secretary to resolve the problem of appointment in the computer also. And the resolving of such an appointment is basically known as process scheduling. So scheduling is the same activity that a company secretary do as an appointment. So scheduling is basically arranging each process in main memory in order of their execution time. So this is basically the task of main memory. So main memory has a task of scheduling each process according to their order of execution time. So this important architecture gives us the information of the three very important components that we have to consider while doing the program, where the main memory has a main task. If we do not reserve our file or request into the main memory, that request will not be considered by the CPU and we can't obtain an output. So when we associate this architecture with the programming language, how it becomes possible to run a C++ program. Now let us move to that idea. See, now what you have to consider as a beginner beginner in computer programming, that when you want to run a computer program, you require two components. The first component is the front end, and this front end is always visible to you. This front end is basically known as text editor. Say Notepad or Turbo. Since we are writing we want to learn C++ program, there is lots of software available which has the editor, text editor with itself. So suppose Turbo C++, if we are considering, it has an editor where you basically write a source code. So here source code of a program is written. So this source code is basically written in some sort of language, and that language is basically high level language like C, C++, Java, etc. So at present we are considering C++. So we are writing a program using the C++, and that program is basically known as source code. And what we will do after writing that program, we have to save this program with .cpp extension to make it a C++ file. Fine. So do remember that when we have finished our program as a source code, it becomes our responsibility to save it as a file into C directory as a .cpp. Even if we don't even if we do not go to the C++ directly, basically your program, whenever you are going to save your program with a .cpp extension in your Turbo C++ software, that file is by default taken into the C++, where you have bin directory where all your source codes are stored here. So after this process, what we require the second component, that is backend. And backend is basically hidden from us, it is not visible to us. And the backend area is constituted by some sort of compiler or interpreter or any sort of translator. So basically when we consider C++ programming, we have to consider compiler. Fine, we have to consider a compiler. And the compiler has a task to check source code for syntax or semantic error. So what basically the syntax or semantic error we will discuss in our coming lecture. Fine. So we have a task to send our source program to get compiled to compiler. So the first step is to write the source program, and the second task is to compile our program, and the compilation is basically done by compiler. When our program is checked by compiler and it finds that it is error free, when this program is found to be error free, So when this program is found to be error free, so that program is stored into the main memory as a process, and that process is basically submitted to the CPU by OS, and it is executed to produce the output that we want. So that is a basic idea of understanding the computer architecture with respect to the computer program. And once we combine these two things, the entire concept become computer language architecture. So whenever you are going to learn C++ program, or whenever you are in a process to revise your concepts where what you have studied now, you must make sure that you must memorize this chart, since it will be very useful for you. So in our next lecture we will start the basic concepts of C++ programming.